Today's hearing examines the administration's budget request for South Asia and our interests in the region. We look forward to hearing from Ambassadors Wells, Ms. Steele, and Ms. Friedman. I'll introduce them at the end of my opening remarks. In the 4 years from 2014 to 2017, our annual aid to South Asia averaged $2.2 billion. This included $1 billion for Afghanistan and nearly $800 million for Pakistan. But our 2018 budget for South Asia has dropped almost in half, and the FY 2020 budget is proposed at $1 billion, including $500 million or a bit more than that for Afghanistan and $70 million for Pakistan. This is a dramatic reduction in our efforts. Will be interesting to hear from our witnesses whether South Asia is dramatically less important to us than it was a few years ago. As to India, we have a strategic partnership in the Indo-Pacific. I'm working to strengthen that relationship as co-chair of the India Caucus. Our partnership is built around common democratic values, our economic relations, and our strategic interests. And of course, there have been several steps forward in the area of joint naval exercises, whether it be U.S.-India or U.S.-Japan-India. We do have a $24 billion trade deficit with India. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses how we're going to open India's markets and how India is going to open its markets so that American exports will increase. As to Pakistan, USAID projects have covered energy, agriculture, education, and the health sectors. There's a small but growing middle-class civil society, independent judiciary, and we've had 2 elected changes in government, at least in the, what should I say, official government, as opposed to whatever role in government the military plays beyond what's set forth in the Constitution. That being said, our aid to Pakistan less than a decade ago was $2 billion a year. We're now have cut it to $70 million. If I did the math quickly, I'd just say that's under 5. That's a 95% reduction, roughly. Pakistan, I think, is very important to the security of the United States. There are those that argue that Pakistan is important because it's close to Afghanistan, and I think it's just the reverse. It's true that looking at history, looking at 2001, Afghanistan suddenly became critical to our national security, and the fact that al-Qaeda was able to operate there had devastating effects on our country. But looking forward, it's clear that Pakistan will have a much bigger impact on the United States, and of course is a nuclear country with a nuclear weapons state with a growing nuclear arsenal. I will want to hear about what we're doing with regard to forced conversions, particularly in southern Pakistan, where young girls are in effect kidnapped, forced to convert, and then forced to Islam, and then forced to marry. I'll want to focus on human rights in Pakistan as a whole, and particularly in Sindh province, and of course Pakistan giving safe haven to terrorists that attack Afghanistan and India. Now, given the importance of Pakistan, I don't think there's anything more important than our public broadcasting to the people of Pakistan. We broadcast, however, only in one Pakistani language, Pushtan, which is both a Pakistani and an Afghan language, leaving out the many tens of millions of Pakistanis that speak Sindhi. I've offered an amendment which is pending on the floor, and my staff may have pulled me out of this room, and if so, it's for a good reason, one that I'm sure all of our witnesses will agree with, and that is to increase the budget of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty so that they can begin a Sindhi language service. Whether we'll be able to get them the full $1.5 million that they've said they wanted for a 24-hour service, or whether it will be less, will depend upon the legislative process. Whether we get anything will depend upon the legislative process. But given Pakistan's, Pakistan is, for example, the only state with nuclear weapons that has experienced a military coup. And I'll turn to the historians on our panel to tell me just how many military coups Pakistan has had. But that's 100% of all the military coups in all nuclear states. So we do need to reach out to the people of Pakistan, and I'm by no means sure that the $70 million we're spending is sufficient. Further, I'll point out that the big thing we're doing for Pakistan is the IMF loan. While our aid is $70 million, the IMF loan is $6 billion. And of course, I don't think that could have happened without the United States. And I hope that I'll be told by our witnesses that when Treasury's over there at the IMF, they aren't just checking the boxes for fiscal purposes, but are in fact taking policy direction from the State Department. In Afghanistan, we've given $130 billion in security and development assistance since 2001. The conflict continues. The Taliban finds safe havens in Pakistan. One of the reasons for this is because Pakistan fears a united Afghanistan that might make claims on its territory, particularly at a time when Pakistan might be preoccupied with India. The way to make Pakistan calmer and more solidly in favor of a peaceful, strong, and prosperous Afghanistan is to gain international recognition from the Durand Line. I'll discuss with our witnesses what we can do at the United Nations to get the entire world to recognize the Durand Line and to make it plain to Afghanistan and Pakistan that their border is that line and that they can live in peace without either side, particularly without Afghanistan looking for an opportunity to expand its territory. As for Sri Lanka, we all express our deepest condolences to those affected by the tragic Easter Sunday terrorist attacks. These attacks took place 10 years after Sri Lanka ended its civil war, and I hope that these attacks will not impede the reconciliation efforts between the Ceylonese and Tamil communities. As to democracy, development, and burden sharing, our foreign aid has supported development in the Maldives, which might be the first nation submerged if we don't do something about global warming and global climate change, Nepal and Bangladesh. And I want to commend Bangladesh for hosting hundreds of thousands of Rohingya from neighboring Myanmar. As I've said in this room before, if Myanmar or Burma is unwilling and or unable to be a good government for the Rohingya people that live in North Rakhine State, then we should transfer, and the United States should support the transfer of that portion of that state to Bangladesh, which is willing to accommodate the people. The Rohingya people of North Rakhine State deserve a government that tries to protect them, not destroy them. Overall, our aid can consolidate democracy and advance development across South Asia. Freedom House scores the region at 3.7 on a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is the highest. This is better than the 4.8 score of Southeast Asia, but the per capita income from South Asia is only $6,700 measured in purchasing power, which is 40% less than Southeast Asia. So there is much development work to be done in South Asia. In recent years, Australia and Canada have annually given $200 million. Japan gave nearly $600 million. In European countries have dispersed apparently $3 billion to South Asia. I encourage our allies to continue that element of burden sharing as we, of course, carry the lion's share of the load when it comes to defense expenditures. With that, I'll see whether there are other members of the subcommittee wishing to make an opening statement. Mr. Perry? Mr. Lee? Well, with that, we'll start with our witnesses. We'll start with Ambassador Alice Wells, former U.S. Ambassador to Jordan, who has headed the South Asia Bureau at the State Department for 2 years as acting Assistant Secretary. Of course, our committee has been urging for the last over 2 years the administration to actually have permanent people in the positions. And I know that the party line of the administration is you don't need permanent people, but I think we do. I'm not saying that Ambassador Wells wouldn't be the perfect permanent Assistant Secretary, but the idea that you can operate the executive branch without appointing people, getting them confirmed, and filling the positions is absurd. That being said, we also will hear from Ms. Gloria Steele, who is acting Assistant Administrator for the Bureau for Asia at the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. And then finally, we'll hear from Ms. Karen Freeman, who is Assistant to the Administrator for the Office of Afghanistan and Pakistan Affairs, again at USAID. Ambassador Wells. I want to thank all of our witnesses. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ambassador Wells, how important is it for us to reach out to the people of Pakistan in the languages they actually speak in their home, particularly in the language of Sindh?
Very important, sir, and we do, through our Karachi consulate, have programming in Sindhi language to the 50 million person audience in that region. We also have local staff, whether it's in Karachi or elsewhere in the country, that are engaged in Sindhi language outreach.
So you're able to reach people by sending speakers out, by convening meetings. But if we did broadcasting in Sindhi, we'd be able to reach all 50 million people. I hope you support that effort. For the record? Yeah.
We appreciate additional efforts of outreach in Pakistan.
Now, the big aid, and we're here talking about 70 million for Pakistan. The big issue is the IMF loan. It looks like that is going through. Ambassador Wells, does Treasury just do what they want for checking off some economic boxes? Or since this is the single most important thing we do with regard to Pakistan, do they listen to you?
Yes, there's a discussion about the conditionality that we think would be appropriate for an IMF package to Pakistan. We've not seen the IMF package yet. We understand that there's been an agreement reached between the IMF and government of Pakistan. But certainly we have communicated our strong views, and Secretary Pompeo has also done so publicly, on the need for any package to include a real structural reform to reinforce...
If I can interrupt, what about Dr. Afridi? Should we block this IMF loan until Dr. Afridi and his family are free here in the United States?
We believe Dr. Afridi is being held wrongly, inappropriately. With Congress's help, we have withheld $130 million in assistance to Pakistan already as a result of his incarceration, and we continue to raise Dr. Afridi's case.
But we're letting them get what they really want, which is the $6 billion from the IMF, and if they default on that, the American taxpayers lose well over $1 billion. Have we offered any prisoner exchange? For example, Dr. Siddiqui, who I know is cooperated in terrorism, but is still given Dr. Afridi's critical role. Are we negotiating? Are we seeking to negotiate with Pakistan some sort of prisoner release?
We have not offered a prisoner exchange for Dr. Afridi. Dr. Afridi is being held wrongly. He's not guilty of any terrorism charges.
Almost every prisoner exchange, when we exchanged spies with the Soviets, the spies that we gave up were people working for communism, and the people we got back were people working for freedom. By all rights, they should have been freed anyway. I would hope that as another committee looks at those who were the first responders at 9/11, that you would do more to get Dr. Afridi released and offer more on the plus side, even if it's unjust, and withhold on the other side, because who's going to ever help America stop terrorism as long as Dr. Afridi's in jail? I've talked before about the missing persons and forced disappearances, particularly of religious minorities in the Sindh province of Pakistan. I'll ask I'll ask all of our witnesses, to what extent do we bring up these human rights issues in our interactions with Pakistani officials? Ms. Steele? And if it's Ms. Friedman who pretty much deals with the back, then I'll just, Ms. Friedman.
It is Ms. Friedman.
USAID remains concerned about all of the reports on human rights violations, and not only do we raise that with the government officials, but we also try to encourage the new initiatives with the government of Pakistan and strengthen civil society to that end. Thank you.
My time has expired. My list of questions has not. We'll now go to a second round. I believe everyone here has asked one round of questions. Ms. Wells, or Ambassador Wells, I didn't promise you could get by with just one round. The current Sri Lankan government came to power with overwhelming support in the Tamil community. The government has disappointed many in the Tamil community as far as its dedication to justice, peace, and reconciliation. There's little movement on a federal constitution giving autonomy to the Tamil regions. And of course, much more needs to be done on accountability for human rights violations that have occurred during the Civil War, and especially its last phases. The Sri Lankan military, and this is probably the most important aspect, continues to hold on to civilian lands in Tamil areas, and of course, the longer that's delayed, the longer they delay the return of that land, the more likely it is that the military occupation becomes permanent. Will we continue to press the government of Sri Lanka on these issues of reconciliation with the Tamil community, and especially the need for the military to give up land that it is occupying?
Yes, and we invited the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister and Foreign Secretary here to Washington for a strategic dialogue, and that was very much a part of the dialogue. We welcome the fact that Sri Lanka, has co-sponsored the UN Human Rights Commission resolution extending the international monitoring of its commitments to human rights, reconciliation, justice, and accountability. The progress has been slower than we would like to see.
I'll count on you to continue to make that a priority for us. What level of aid have we provided for the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh? Yeah, Ms. Steele.
The total amount of funding for the Rohingyas, both in Burma and Bangladesh, is approximately $500 million to date, starting in 2017.
So that's $500 million a year?
No, $500 million
Total.
Since 2017.
Since 2017. So with the administration budget request, what would it be for the coming fiscal year?
A significant amount of the funding that goes to the Rohingya is humanitarian assistance, which is not included in the budget that you have reviewed.
Is not included in the,
In the budget that we are discussing. It is, for
Yes.
instance, for USAID, it's part of our Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance
Right.
and Food for Peace, which is separate from the budget that we
you
use.
would, I realize it's outside the purview of your agency. Do you happen to know what it is? Can you give us a number or?
Oh, I'm not aware of what the number is
okay.
for,
So we'll have
for
to-
budget outside of
We'll have
my
to
agency.
put it together. Obviously, Bangladesh is a poor country and has taken in people that would otherwise be not only ethnically cleansed, but subject to genocide. I realize that, I believe, Ambassador Wells, your purview does not extend to Myanmar, Burma. No. But the question I have, and I guess this affects your purview, is whether the United States will take the position that if the government of Burma, Myanmar does not extend citizenship and protection to the Rohingya who were born there, that we would support the transfer of North Rakhine State to Bangladeshi sovereignty. That's right on the border, literally, of your jurisdiction.
Well, I won't speak for my colleagues, but I think it's a traditional position of the State Department that we support the territorial integrity of countries and the
But
sovereignty
when
of
the
countries.
people of South Sudan were subject to horrific treatment by the Khartoum government, we were in effect the midwives for the creation of an independent South Sudan. And I won't say that that's worked out well, but we did support the creation of an independent state when a government in Khartoum could not.
Right. What we've focused on is, can we get the conditions in Myanmar so you can have Rohingya go and look and see what their neighborhoods look like? Are the conditions such that they have confidence in returning? How can we?
Does it, and is citizenship and passports part of that?
The UN report recommendations listed, citizenship as one of the key issues that would help restore confidence. I think right now, the Rohingya would like to return home if the conditions support a dignified return. And for those countries that are working in Myanmar and supporting the Myanmar government, it's how do we get the Myanmar government to create
I would say
those
if the
conditions?
Myanmar government doesn't announce that it is dedicated to the protection of these people and the issuance of citizenship documents, that we alter our position and call for the transfer of North Rakhine State to a country that will protect these people. This is their land. They've lived there for generations. They've been subject to ethnic cleansing and one might say attempted genocide. Certainly, if you lay that out compared to the facts of South Sudan, a change in international borders would be called for. Keep in mind, the government of Khartoum never denied the citizenship of the people of South Sudan. I'll turn to Ms. Steele. What steps can USAID and the State Department take to partner with the charitable efforts of the South Asia diaspora community in the United States to help the people of South Asia? How can you work with the large and generous diaspora community?
We have been working with them, in particular with the Indian diaspora, in order to identify areas. And they had expressed has the highest TB maternal and child mortality happens in India, and some of the most polluted cities in the world are in India. And so we have agreed to work together. Our proposed plan to create a foundation, the U.S.-India Foundation, using Indian private sector, is intended to catalyze and mobilize Indian resources to address our joint interests in development.
I thank you. And we often hear in Washington of public-private partnerships. When I hear that phrase, I get concerned that maybe the deal is too good for private investors seeking a profit, but in the case we're talking about here, we're talking about a public-private partnership with charitable intent. With that, I'll recognize the ranking member.
Thank you.